Marcus Rodriguez had been working construction for 23 years, and he thought he had seen everything the city could throw at him. Broken pipes, rotting foundations, families of rats the size of small cats, and once, memorably, a vintage car buried under what used to be someone's backyard. But nothing had prepared him for what he would find on that gray Tuesday morning in the narrow alley behind the old Pemberton building. The demolition crew had been taking down the century-old structure for 2 weeks. Marcus, as foreman, always arrived an hour before his team to survey the site and check for any overnight changes or safety hazards. The Pemberton building had been abandoned for nearly 15 years, and the city had finally decided it was more of a liability than a landmark. What remained was a skeleton of brick and steel, with rubble-filled spaces where rooms used to be. Marcus pulled his truck up to the usual spot and grabbed his hard hat from the passenger seat. The morning air was thick with the promise of rain, and the sky hung low and gray over the construction site. He could smell the dust and decay that always lingered around old buildings, mixed with the exhaust from the nearby highway. It was going to be another long day of careful demolition, making sure they didn't damage the adjacent buildings that were still very much in use. As he walked around the perimeter of the site, checking the temporary fencing and warning signs, Marcus heard something that made him stop in his tracks. It was a sound unlike anything he had ever heard before, a high-pitched, desperate crying that seemed almost human, but not quite. The sound was coming from the narrow alley that ran between the Pemberton building and the old Murphy's diner next door. The alley was barely 6 feet wide, filled with years of accumulated trash, broken bottles, and debris that had blown in from the street. Most people avoided it entirely, and even the homeless population that sometimes sheltered in the area seemed to give it a wide berth. The crying sound came again, more insistent this time, echoing off the brick walls in a way that made Marcus's skin crawl. Marcus had 3 kids of his own, and the sound triggered every parental instinct he possessed. Someone or something was in distress, and despite his better judgment, he found himself walking toward the mouth of the alley. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, casting a weak beam into the shadowy space between the buildings. The smell hit him first, not the usual urban decay he expected, but something strange and acrid like burning metal mixed with something organic he couldn't identify. The crying continued, definitely coming from deeper in the alley. Marcus stepped carefully over broken concrete and scattered refuse, following the sound toward what looked like a pile of old construction materials that had been dumped against the far wall. As he got closer, the crying became more distinct, and Marcus realized with growing alarm that it sounded like a baby. His heart rate picked up, and he moved faster, imagining some terrible scenario where someone had abandoned an infant in this horrible place. The thought made him sick, but it also made him more determined to help whatever was making that sound. When his flashlight beam finally illuminated the source of the crying, Marcus stopped so suddenly that he nearly tripped over a broken chunk of concrete. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about the world. Huddled against a pile of rotting wooden planks was a creature about the size of a house cat, but it was definitely not a cat. Its body was covered in scales that shifted between deep green and bronze in the light from his phone. It had 4 legs ending in small, but sharp-looking claws, a long tail that curled around its body, and wings, actual wings, folded against its back. But it was the creature's head that made Marcus's mouth go dry. It was distinctly reptilian, with large, bright yellow eyes that reflected the light like a cat's, but filled with an intelligence that was unmistakably aware. The creature was clearly very young, whatever it was. Its scales looked soft and new, and it moved with the unsteady gait of something that had only recently learned to walk. When it saw Marcus's light, it lifted its head and made the crying sound again, and Marcus could see that its mouth was filled with tiny needle-sharp teeth. Marcus stood frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. His rational mind was telling him that what he was seeing was impossible. Dragons didn't exist. They were myths, fairy tales, stories people told children. But the evidence was right there in front of him, crying pitifully and looking up at him with those impossibly bright eyes. The creature tried to stand, but stumbled, and Marcus could see that one of its wings was bent at an odd angle. It was hurt, probably badly, and despite its impossible nature, every instinct Marcus had was telling him that this was a baby that needed help. The crying became more urgent, and the little dragon, because that's what it was, Marcus finally admitted to himself, began trying to crawl toward him. Marcus crouched down slowly, not wanting to frighten the creature any more than it already was. Up close, he could see that its scales were indeed soft, almost fuzzy like the down on a baby bird. The injured wing was definitely broken, hanging limply against its side. There were also several cuts on its body, as if it had been scraped against rough surfaces, possibly during a fall. "Hey there, little guy," Marcus found himself saying softly, the same tone he used with his own children when they were hurt or scared. "What happened to you?" The dragon stopped crying and tilted its head, studying Marcus with those bright yellow eyes. For a moment, Marcus had the unsettling feeling that the creature was evaluating him, deciding whether he could be trusted. Then, to his amazement, the dragon made a different sound, a soft, almost purring noise that was clearly an attempt at communication. Marcus looked around the alley, trying to figure out where the creature could have come from. The walls on either side rose 3 stories high, with no obvious openings or nests where a dragon might have been living. The only explanation he could think of was that it had fallen from somewhere much higher up, possibly from the roof of one of the buildings. But that raised even more questions about how a dragon had ended up in downtown Chicago in the first place. The sound of approaching vehicles from the street reminded Marcus that his construction crew would be arriving soon. He needed to make a decision quickly. He could leave the creature where it was and pretend he had never seen it. He could call animal control or the police, though he had no idea how he would explain what he had found. Or he could do something that went against every reasonable thought in his head. The dragon made the purring sound again and tried to crawl closer to him, its movements clumsy and painful to watch. The sight of this obviously helpless baby animal, mythical or not, struggling with its injuries was more than Marcus could stand. Before he could talk himself out of it, he was reaching into the alley. "Okay, little guy," he said quietly, "let's get you out of here." The dragon didn't resist when Marcus gently scooped it up. It was surprisingly warm, almost hot to the touch, and heavier than he had expected for its size. Its scales felt smooth and slightly metallic under his hands. As soon as Marcus lifted it, the dragon curled against his chest and made a contented sound that was part purr, part sigh. Marcus stood up carefully, cradling the creature against his work jacket. The dragon felt solid and real in his arms, its weight and warmth dispelling any lingering thoughts that this might be some kind of hallucination or elaborate prank. This was actually happening. He was holding a baby dragon in a back alley in Chicago, and somehow he was going to have to figure out what to do about it. The sound of truck engines grew louder, and Marcus knew his crew would be pulling into the site any minute. He looked down at the dragon, which had closed its eyes and seemed to be falling asleep against the warmth of his body. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, it was now his responsibility. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, Marcus felt a strange sense of protective calm settling over him. He walked quickly back to his truck, shielding the dragon from view with his jacket. The creature didn't stir as Marcus opened the passenger door and gently placed it on the seat, using his spare work shirt to create a makeshift bed. The dragon's breathing was steady but rapid, and Marcus could see that it was exhausted from crying and pain. As the first of his crew's vehicles turned into the site, Marcus closed the truck door and tried to compose himself. He had no idea what he was going to do with a baby dragon, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let anyone else find out about it. Not yet. Not until he figured out what was happening and how to keep the creature safe. Tony Valdez, his lead operator, waved from across the lot as he climbed out of his truck. "Morning, Marcus. Ready to bring down the rest of this old pile." Marcus waved back, hoping his voice would sound normal. Yeah, let's do this thing. But as he walked toward his crew to begin the day's work, Marcus's mind was racing. Hidden in his truck was a creature that shouldn't exist, and somehow he had become responsible for its welfare. The questions seemed endless. Where had it come from? Were there others? How was he going to explain this to his wife, Maria? What did baby dragons eat? How was he going to get it medical attention for its injuries? Most importantly, what was he going to do when the dragon grew up? Marcus spent the rest of the morning and a daze, going through the motions of supervising the demolition while his thoughts kept returning to the small creature sleeping in his truck. Every few minutes, he found an excuse to check on it, pretending to retrieve tools or paperwork from his vehicle. The dragon slept deeply, occasionally making small sounds that tugged at Marcus's heart. During his lunch break, Marcus drove to a nearby pet store, leaving the dragon hidden under his work shirt in the truck. He bought a small pet carrier, some soft blankets, and after much deliberation, a variety of different pet foods. He had no idea what dragons ate, but he figured he would start with the basics and see what worked. When he returned to the truck, the dragon was awake and looking around with curious eyes. It perked up when it saw Marcus, making the soft purring sound again. Marcus noticed that its colors seemed brighter now, the bronze tones in its scales more pronounced. He carefully transferred the creature to the pet carrier, along with the soft blankets, and was relieved when the dragon immediately curled up in the makeshift nest. The afternoon passed slowly, with Marcus constantly distracted and checking his watch. All he could think about was getting the dragon home and figuring out how to help it. The injured wing was still his biggest concern, but he had no idea how to find a veterinarian who would be willing to treat a mythical creature, assuming he could even find one who would believe what they were seeing. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, Marcus was the first to pack up his tools and head for his truck. He called out casual goodbyes to his crew, trying to act like this was just another ordinary day ending. As he drove through the Chicago traffic toward his house in the suburbs, Marcus practiced different ways to explain the situation to Maria. None of them sounded even remotely believable. The dragon slept peacefully in its carrier on the seat beside him, occasionally stirring when they hit a bump or stopped at a traffic light. Marcus found himself talking to it softly, the same way he used to talk to his children when they were babies and he was driving them home from the hospital. "We're going to figure this out, little guy," he said as they turned into his neighborhood. "I don't know how, but we're going to take care of you." As Marcus pulled into his driveway, he saw Maria's car already there, which meant she was home from her job at the elementary school. Through the kitchen window, he could see her moving around, probably starting dinner. In a few minutes, he was going to have to walk into his house and somehow explain to his wife that he had found a baby dragon and brought it home. Marcus sat in his truck for a moment, looking at the carrier and then at his house. His normal, predictable life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine. But as he looked down at the sleeping dragon, he knew he had made the right choice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he couldn't have left that helpless creature in the alley to die. The dragon opened one bright yellow eye and looked at him as if sensing that they had arrived somewhere important. Marcus took a deep breath, picked up the carrier, and headed for his front door. The adventure was just beginning. Marcus stood at his front door for a full minute, holding the pet carrier and trying to work up the courage to go inside. Through the kitchen window, he could see Maria stirring something on the stove while their youngest daughter, 8-year-old Sophia, sat at the counter doing homework. Their twins, Miguel and Elena, were probably upstairs in their rooms. It was a perfectly normal Tuesday evening in the Rodriguez household, except for the mythical creature sleeping in the carrier in Marcus's hands. He finally opened the door, calling out his usual greeting. "Hey, family, I'm home. Daddy." Sophia jumped down from her stool and ran to hug him, but stopped when she saw the carrier. "What's in there? Did you bring us a pet?" Maria appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. After 18 years of marriage, she knew her husband well enough to recognize when something was bothering him. "Marcus? What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. Can everyone come into the living room?" Marcus said carefully, "I need to talk to all of you about something." Maria's expression shifted to concern. Is everything okay? Did something happen at work? Miguel, Elena, come downstairs. Marcus called up to the second floor. Family meeting. The twins, both 15, appeared at the top of the stairs with a dramatic reluctance that only teenagers could manage. Miguel was still wearing his soccer cleats from practice, and Elena had paint on her fingers from her art class. Do we have to? Elena groaned. I have a history test tomorrow. Yes, you have to, Marcus said, his voice carrying more tension than he intended. This is important. The family gathered in the living room, with Sophia bouncing excitedly on the couch, and the twins sprawling in chairs with the studied boredom of adolescence. Maria sat beside Marcus, studying his face with growing worry. Okay, Marcus began, setting the carrier on the coffee table. What I'm about to show you is going to be hard to believe. Actually, it's going to be impossible to believe. But I need you all to stay calm, and let me explain. Dad, you're kind of freaking me out here, Miguel said, sitting up straighter. Marcus looked at each member of his family, taking a deep breath. This morning, I found something at the construction site. Something that shouldn't exist, but does. He unlatched the carrier door. I found a baby dragon. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then, Elena laughed. Okay, Dad, very funny. What did you really bring home? A lizard. But Sophia had moved closer to the carrier and was peering inside. Her eyes went wide, and she made a soft gasping sound. Oh my goodness. Mama, come look. Maria leaned forward, and Marcus watched her face go through the same sequence of emotions he had experienced in the alley: disbelief, shock, and, finally, wonder. The dragon had woken up and was looking back at them with those bright yellow eyes, making the soft purring sound that Marcus was already becoming familiar with. That's not possible, Maria whispered, but she couldn't take her eyes off the creature. Miguel and Elena crowded around the carrier, their teenage coolness completely forgotten. Holy cow, Miguel, breathe. Dad, that's actually a dragon. Is it real? Elena asked, reaching out tentatively before pulling her hand back. Can I touch it? Very carefully, Marcus said. It's hurt. I think its wing is broken. Sophia, who had always been the gentlest of his children, slowly extended her finger toward the dragon. The creature sniffed at her carefully, then rubbed its small head against her finger. Sophia giggled with delight. It's so warm, she said, and its scales are soft. Does it have a name? I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, Marcus admitted, and I haven't thought of a name yet. I've been trying to figure out how to take care of it. Maria was still staring at the dragon in amazement. Marcus, where did you find it? How is this possible? Marcus explained about hearing the crying in the alley and finding the injured creature among the debris. As he talked, the dragon seemed to respond to his voice, moving to the front of the carrier and looking directly at him while he spoke. We have to help it, Sophia said firmly. It's hurt and scared and it needs us. But what do dragons eat? Elena asked practically. And how big will it get? And what if someone finds out we have it? Those were exactly the questions that had been weighing on Marcus's mind all day. I don't know, he admitted. I bought some different kinds of pet food at the store, but I have no idea what dragons actually eat. And you're right about keeping it secret. We can't let anyone know about this. What about taking to a vet? Miguel asked. That wing looks really bad. Marcus had been wrestling with that problem all afternoon. How do I explain a dragon to a veterinarian? They'll think I'm crazy, or they'll want to call scientists or the government or something. I don't know what would happen to the dragon then. The family sat in silence for a moment, watching the small creature explore its carrier. Despite the impossibility of the situation, Marcus felt a sense of rightness about bringing it home. His family was handling the revelation better than he had dared to hope. We need to research dragons, Elena said suddenly. I mean, there have to be legends and stories about what they eat and how to take care of them, right? Even if people thought they were just myths. That's actually a really good idea, Maria said, her practical nature taking over. And we need to set up a proper place for it to live while its wing heals. The basement might work. It's warm and private. Can we try feeding it? Sophia asked. It might be hungry. Marcus had brought several different types of food from the pet store, cat food, bird food, and even some raw meat that the clerk had recommended for reptiles. They decided to start with small amounts of each to see what the dragon preferred. To their surprise, the dragon showed no interest in the commercial pet foods, but immediately perked up when Marcus offered it a small piece of raw beef. It ate delicately, using its small claws to hold the meat while it tore off pieces with those needle-sharp teeth. "It's a carnivore," Elena observed, taking notes in a small notebook she had retrieved from her backpack. "That makes sense. Most big predators are." "Elena, what are you doing?" Marcus asked. Taking notes, she said matter-of-factly, "If we're going to take care of a dragon, we need to document everything we learn about it. What it eats, how it behaves, how fast it grows. This could be important." Marcus felt a surge of pride in his daughter's scientific approach. All of his children were showing remarkable adaptability to this extraordinary situation. Over the next few hours, the family worked together to create a temporary home for the dragon in the basement. They set up a large dog crate with soft blankets and a heating lamp they borrowed from their neighbor's chicken coop setup. Maria, who had a first aid certification from her teaching job, carefully examined the dragon's injured wing. "I think it's fractured," she said gently, "but not completely broken. We might be able to splint it, but I'm not sure how dragon anatomy works compared to birds or other animals." The dragon seemed to trust Maria instinctively, lying still while she gently probed its wing and cleaned the cuts on its body with antiseptic. It only made small protesting sounds when she touched particularly tender spots. "We should call it Ember," Sophia announced while they watched the dragon settle into its new home. "Because it's so warm, and because Ember sounds like a dragon name." "Ember," Marcus repeated, testing the name. The dragon lifted its head when he said it, as if recognizing that the sound was meant for it. "I think that works." As the evening wore on, the family established a routine for caring for their unusual new member. They took turns sitting with Ember, offering water and small pieces of meat. The dragon seemed most comfortable when someone was nearby, becoming restless and making crying sounds when left alone. "I think it's used to being with others of its kind," Elena observed. "Baby animals usually need constant contact with their family. We might be its family now." The implications of that statement weren't lost on Marcus. If Elena was right, they weren't just providing temporary shelter for an injured animal. They were essentially adopting a dragon. That night, after the children had reluctantly gone to bed, Marcus and Maria sat in the basement watching Ember sleep. The dragon had curled up in a tight ball, its tail wrapped around its body, and its good wing covering most of its head. Its breathing was steady and peaceful, and occasionally it made small chirping sounds in its sleep. "This is really happening, isn't it?" Maria said quietly. "We're really sitting here watching a dragon sleep in our basement. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, and this will all have been some kind of stress dream," Marcus admitted. "But it's real. Ember is real." "What are we going to do, Marcus?" "I mean long term. Dragons and legends grow up to be huge. Are we prepared for that?" Marcus had been trying not to think too far ahead, but he knew Maria was right to be concerned. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I couldn't leave it in that alley to die. And look at it. It's just a baby. It needs us." Maria reached over and took his hand. "I'm not saying we made the wrong choice. I'm just saying we need to think about what comes next. What if there are others looking for it? What if its mother comes searching?" Those possibilities had occurred to Marcus as well, and they worried him. But as he watched Ember sleep peacefully in its makeshift nest, he felt the same protective instinct that had driven him to pick up the creature in the first place. "We'll figure it out," he said, "one day at a time." The next morning brought new challenges. Marcus had to leave for work, but he was reluctant to leave Ember alone with the family. The dragon had become noticeably more active overnight, exploring its crate and showing increasing curiosity about its surroundings. Its wing, while still injured, seemed less painful, and it was moving around with more confidence. "I could check on it during my lunch break," Maria offered. The school is only 10 minutes away. Sophia, predictably, wanted to stay home from school to take care of Ember. "But what if it gets scared without us?" she argued. "What if it thinks we abandoned it?" Dragons probably sleep a lot during the day, Elena said, consulting the notes she had taken the night before. Most reptiles are less active when it's not warm and sunny. Miguel had been unusually quiet during breakfast, and Marcus finally asked what was bothering him. I was just thinking, Miguel said slowly. If there's one dragon, there might be others. And if Ember fell from somewhere high up, like you think it did, maybe there's a whole family of them living somewhere in the city that nobody knows about. The thought sent a chill through Marcus. The idea of one baby dragon was manageable, barely. The idea of an entire population of dragons hidden somewhere in Chicago was almost too much to contemplate. Let's focus on taking care of Ember for now, Marcus said. We can worry about the bigger questions later. But as he drove to work that morning, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Miguel's words. If there were other dragons, they might be looking for their missing baby. And if they found the Rodriguez family, Marcus had no idea whether they would be grateful for Ember's rescue or angry about its captivity. At the construction site, Marcus tried to focus on his work, but he found himself constantly distracted. Every time he looked at the alley where he had found Ember, he wondered if he had missed something important. Had there been signs of a nest nearby? Evidence of other dragons? During his lunch break, Marcus walked through the alley again, this time examining every inch of the space carefully. Near the back wall, partially hidden under some fallen debris, he found something that made his heart race. A piece of eggshell about the size of his palm. It was unlike any eggshell he had ever seen, with an iridescent quality that shifted from deep blue to silver depending on the angle of the light. Marcus pocketed the shell fragment and continued searching. Near the opposite wall, he found two more pieces and what looked like the remains of a nest made from shredded materials and lined with something that might have been fur or very fine feathers. The nest was definitely large enough to have held several eggs. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Ember hadn't just fallen from somewhere high up. It had hatched in this alley. And if there had been other eggs, there might be other baby dragons somewhere nearby, possibly in just as much danger as Ember had been. Marcus spent the rest of his lunch break searching the surrounding area, looking in every dumpster, doorway, and hiding place he could find. He didn't find any other dragons, but he did discover more pieces of eggshell scattered around a 3-block radius, as if they had been carried by wind or scattered by scavengers. That evening, Marcus shared his discoveries with his family. Elena examined the shell fragments under a magnifying glass, taking detailed notes about their color and texture. This is definitely not from any normal bird or reptile, she said. Look at how thick it is and the way the color changes. And feel how warm it still is, even hours after you found it. Maria looked troubled. If Ember had siblings, where are they now? Could they still be alive somewhere? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Ember, meanwhile, seemed to be recovering quickly from its injuries. Its appetite was strong, and it had begun making a new sound, a soft, trilling noise that seemed to express contentment. But Marcus noticed that sometimes the dragon would stop whatever it was doing and tilt its head, as if listening for something only it could hear. Maybe it's trying to hear its family, Sophia said when Marcus mentioned this behavior. Animals can hear sounds that people can't. Maybe there are other dragons calling for it. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about the growing complexity of their situation. They had gone from rescuing one injured baby dragon to potentially being responsible for finding and helping other missing dragons. The weight of that responsibility was enormous, but Marcus knew there was no turning back now. In the basement, Ember slept peacefully in its warm nest, unaware of the questions and concerns swirling around its future. But sometimes in the deepest part of the night, it would lift its head and make a soft calling sound, as if reaching out to family members who might be listening somewhere in the darkness of the city. Marcus would hear these calls through the baby monitor they had set up, and each time, his resolve strengthened. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers they might face, the Rodriguez family was committed to protecting Ember and finding answers to the mystery of where dragons came from and why they were living hidden in Chicago. The adventure was becoming more complicated, but Marcus knew they were just getting started. 3 weeks after finding Ember, Marcus Rodriguez thought he was getting used to having a dragon for a pet. He was wrong. The first sign that everything was about to change came on a Saturday morning when Marcus went down to the basement to check on Ember and found the dragon missing from its crate. The door was still latched, the heating lamp was still glowing warmly, but Ember was nowhere to be seen. Ember. Marcus called softly, not wanting to wake the rest of the family. Where are you, little guy? A soft trilling sound came from behind the water heater. Marcus found Ember there, but the dragon looked different. In just 3 weeks, it had grown considerably, now about the size of a medium dog rather than a house cat. Its scales had deepened in color and developed an almost metallic sheen. Most remarkably, its injured wing had completely healed and was now spread wide as Ember practiced small flapping motions. How did you get out of your crate? Marcus asked, crouching down. Ember trilled again and padded over to him, but instead of its usual gentle approach, the dragon nudged Marcus firmly toward the basement stairs. You want to go upstairs? Marcus was puzzled. Ember had never shown interest in leaving the basement before, but the dragon was insistent, pushing at Marcus's legs and looking up at him with those bright yellow eyes that seemed more intelligent every day. Marcus scooped up Ember, surprised again by how much heavier the dragon had become. As they reached the top of the basement stairs, Ember began making a new sound, a low, rumbling noise that Marcus could feel vibrating through the dragon's body. It wasn't threatening, but it was definitely urgent. In the kitchen, Maria was making coffee while Sophia ate cereal at the counter. Both of them looked up in surprise when they saw Marcus carrying Ember. Why did you bring him upstairs? Maria asked. I thought we agreed he should stay in the basement until he's bigger. Before Marcus could answer, Ember suddenly lifted his head and made a loud, clear call, nothing like any sound they had heard from him before. It was hauntingly beautiful, like a song played on some impossible instrument, and it seemed to echo through the house with unusual resonance. Sophia dropped her spoon. What was that? The answer came immediately. From somewhere outside, another voice responded, the same impossible song, but deeper, more mature. Then another voice joined in, and another. Within moments, the air was filled with dragon song, coming from multiple directions around the neighborhood. Oh my God, Maria whispered, looking toward the windows. There are more of them. Marcus set Ember down, and the dragon immediately ran to the sliding glass door that led to their backyard. He stood up on his hind legs, pressing his front paws against the glass, and calling again. The response from outside was immediate and much closer. They're looking for him, Elena said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with Miguel close behind. Both twins looked excited and terrified at the same time. His family is looking for him. Marcus felt his heart racing. After weeks of wondering about other dragons, they were about to get their answer. But he had no idea whether the approaching dragons would be grateful for Ember's care or angry about his captivity. Should we let him out? Sophia asked, her voice small with worry. Before Marcus could decide, the decision was made for them. A shadow passed over the backyard, followed by another, and then 3 adult dragons landed gracefully on their lawn. They were magnificent and terrifying, each about the size of a small airplane, with scales that shifted between deep emerald and gold in the morning sunlight. Their eyes were the same brilliant yellow as Ember's, but ancient and knowing in a way that made Marcus feel very small. Ember went wild with excitement, scratching at the glass door and singing his joy at seeing his family. The largest of the adult dragons, clearly the leader, approached the door and lowered its great head to study the small dragon through the glass. We have to let him go to them, Maria said quietly. They're his family. Marcus nodded, though his heart was breaking. In just 3 weeks, Ember had become part of their family. But he understood that keeping the dragon from his real parents would be wrong, no matter how much they had grown to love him. Marcus slowly slid open the door. Ember shot outside immediately, running to the largest dragon and chirping excitedly. The adult dragon bent down and gently nuzzled the baby, making soft, rumbling sounds that were clearly expressions of relief and love. The Rodriguez family stood in their doorway, watching the reunion with mixed emotions. It was beautiful to see Ember with his real family, but it was also heartbreaking to realize that their time with the dragon was coming to an end. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of simply taking Ember and flying away, the largest dragon approached the house. When it was about 10 feet from the door, it settled into a crouch and began to change. Marcus blinked hard, certain he was hallucinating. But no, the dragon was actually shifting, its massive form condensing and reshaping until a woman stood where the dragon had been. She was tall and elegant, with long dark hair and the same yellow eyes that Ember possessed. Her clothes seemed to be made from some kind of fabric that shifted colors like dragon scales. "You saved my son," the woman said, her voice carrying the musical quality of dragon song. "I owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Marcus found his voice with difficulty. "You can talk. You're human." The woman smiled. "I am both and neither. My name is Valeria, and I am what humans call a dragon shifter. We are an ancient people, older than your recorded history. We have lived alongside humans for thousands of years, hidden in plain sight." Maria stepped forward, her teacher's instincts overcoming her shock. "You mean there are more of you? Living here in the city?" "We have communities all over the world," Valeria explained. "We appear human when we choose to, dragon when we need to. The old stories your ancestors told about us were not myths, they were memories." Miguel, always practical, asked the question Marcus was thinking. "Why did Ember hatch in that alley? Why wasn't he with you?" Valeria's expression darkened. "Our nesting sites have been under attack. There are humans who know about us, who hunt us for our scales and our magic. They found our traditional rookery and destroyed it. Ember and his clutch mates were scattered across the city when we had to evacuate quickly." "Clutch mates?" Elena asked. "You mean there were other babies?" "4 others. Thanks to your father's discovery of the eggshell fragments, we were able to track them down. Ember was the last one we found, and we had begun to fear the worst." Sophia stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Is Ember going to be okay? His wing was really hurt." Valeria's expression softened as she looked at the youngest member of the Rodriguez family. "His wing has healed perfectly, thanks to your care. But more than that, you gave him something precious. You gave him love and safety when he needed it most. Dragon hatchlings who are separated from their families often fail to thrive, even when they are physically healthy. Ember survived because you made him feel wanted." Marcus watched Ember playing with what were obviously his siblings, for other young dragons who had appeared from different directions around the yard. They were all healthy and happy, tumbling over each other in the grass while their parents watched with obvious relief. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "I mean, are you going to stay hidden? Are there going to be more attacks?" Valeria exchanged a look with the other adult dragons, who had also taken human form. Marcus was startled to recognize one of them, Dr. Sarah Chun, who worked at the emergency veterinary clinic where Maria had taken their cat last year. "The world is changing," Valeria said. "Humans are becoming more aware of us, for better and worse. Some seek to exploit us, but others, like your family, show that coexistence is possible. We are considering whether it might be time to reveal ourselves more openly." Dr. Chin stepped forward. "Marcus, what you did for Ember shows the kind of character we look for. Would you be interested in helping us? We need human allies who can act as intermediaries, people who understand both worlds." "What kind of help?" Maria asked, her protective instincts engaged. "Nothing dangerous," Valeria assured her. "But there'll be other young dragons who need care, other situations where a human perspective and human connections would be invaluable. And there are humans who are asking questions, getting close to the truth. We need people who can help manage those revelations carefully." Marcus looked at his family, seeing excitement and nervousness in equal measure on their faces. This was a bigger adventure than any of them had imagined when he first brought Ember home. "Can we think about it?" he asked. Of course, Valeria said. But first, there is something Ember wants to give you. The dragon in question had approached during their conversation and was now sitting at Marcus's feet. In his small claws, he held something that glittered in the sunlight. A scale, but not one that had been shed naturally. This scale was larger and more brilliant than the others, with a rainbow of colors that shifted and swirled like oil on water. A heart scale, Valeria explained. Dragons give them only to those they consider true family. Ember chose to give this to you, Marcus. It means he will always consider you his second father. Marcus knelt down and accepted the scale from Ember. It was warm and seemed to pulse with its own inner light. As soon as he touched it, Marcus felt a strange sensation. He could sense Ember's emotions, feel the dragon's love and gratitude and hope for the future. Will we see him again? Sophia asked, tears streaming down her face. Ember chirped and nuzzled her hand, then trotted over to each member of the Rodriguez family in turn. When he reached Elena, he carefully placed a smaller scale in her notebook. For Miguel, he had a claw shed that gleamed like black metal. For Maria, a soft, downy feather from his wing that shimmered like starlight. He will visit, Valeria promised. Dragon bonds, once formed, are never truly broken. And if you decide to help us, you will be part of our extended family. Your children will grow up knowing our children. The world will become bigger and more magical than you ever imagined. As the dragon family prepared to leave, gathering together in the center of the yard, Marcus felt a strange mixture of sadness and anticipation. Saying goodbye to Ember was painful, but the promise of staying connected to this hidden world was thrilling. Where will you go? Marcus asked. We have safe places, Valeria said. Ancient sanctuaries that have protected our kind for millennia. But we also have modern facilities, laboratories where we study how to heal the damage humans have done to the environment, schools where our young learn to navigate both worlds, hospitals where we tend to all kinds of magical creatures. Magic is real, Elena said wonderingly. Actually real. Magic is just science that humans haven't figured out yet, Dr. Chin said with a smile. We've had thousands of years to study it. Maybe someday we can share that knowledge. The dragons began to shift back to their natural forms, and Marcus was awed all over again by their beauty and power. Ember, still small compared to his family, spread his wings experimentally and managed to achieve a few feet of lift before settling back down. He'll be flying soon, Valeria said, now in her dragon form, but somehow still able to speak in a way the humans could understand. Next time you see him, he'll probably be able to carry you. Carry us. Sophia's eyes went wide. You mean we could fly with him? If you choose to become our allies, Valeria confirmed. There are adventures waiting for you that you cannot even imagine. One by one, the dragons took to the sky, their massive wings creating winds that rustled every tree in the neighborhood. Ember was the last to leave, circling back several times to trill goodbye to each member of the Rodriguez family. As they disappeared into the distance, heading toward the mountains west of Chicago, Marcus felt the scale in his pocket pulse with warmth. Ember was still there, in a way, still connected to them across any distance. So, Maria said finally, breaking the silence that had fallen over the yard, I guess we're not just a normal family anymore. Were we ever? Miguel asked with a grin. Dad finds mythical creatures in back alleys. Mom teaches elementary school kids who are probably half fairy for all we know now. Elena takes scientific notes on everything, including dragons. And Sophia makes friends with magical animals. We were never normal. Sophia giggled, wiping the last of her tears away. I can't wait to tell Ember about school when he visits. Do you think he'd like to meet my teacher? I think, Marcus said, putting his arm around his daughter's shoulders, that we're going to have to be very careful about who we tell these stories to. But, yes, when Ember visits, he can meet whoever you want him to meet. Elena was already making notes in her notebook, her scientific mind working furiously. We need to research dragon shifters, learn about their history and culture. If we're going to be allies, we should understand what we're allying with. And We need to figure out how to explain our sudden expertise in magical creatures, Maria added practically. People are going to notice if we start acting like we know secrets about the world. Marcus looked around his backyard, which looked completely normal now, except for the large patches of flattened grass where dragons had landed. In the span of an hour, his family's entire world had expanded beyond anything they could have imagined. They had become part of something ancient and magical, something that would change their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. The scale in his pocket pulsed again, and Marcus smiled. Somewhere out there, Ember was safe with his real family, but still carrying a piece of the Rodriguez family in his heart. And soon, Marcus knew, they would be reunited for new adventures. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had been just a construction foreman who thought he understood how the world worked. Now he was the human father of a dragon, an ally to an ancient magical people, and a guardian of secrets that could change everything. As his family headed back into the house, talking excitedly about dragons and magic and the future, Marcus took one last look at the sky where Ember had disappeared. The adventure that had started with a crying sound in a back alley was far from over. In fact, Marcus realized with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, it had only just begun. The world was full of magic, and the Rodriguez family was now part of it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Human and dragon, mundane and magical, ordinary family, and extraordinary guardians of an impossible truth. The scale in his pocket grew warm one more time, and Marcus could swear he heard Ember's voice carried on the wind, promising that this was not goodbye, but simply until next time. Marcus smiled and went inside to help his family plan for a future that would be nothing like the one they had imagined, but everything they could have hoped for. After all, how many people got the chance to help raise a dragon and bridge the gap between two worlds? Not many, Marcus thought, but somehow, impossibly, he and his family had been chosen for exactly that adventure. And he couldn't wait to see what happened next.